Good evening, I'm Richard Ruelas here in the Arizona Republic and AZ Central Newsroom studio with the debate tonight with the 5 candidates who are seeking your vote in the Republican primary for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Early voting starts today, so we hope to give you a chance to hear the views of the 5 candidates. I'll introduce them starting at the end. Frank Riggs, a former California U.S. Congressman and 2014 candidate for governor.
Good evening.
Next to him is Bob Branch, a college professor, Maricopa County Parks and Recreation Commissioner. Tracy Livingston, a former teacher and Maricopa County College's board member.
Thank you.
Jonathan Gelbart, as his button says, a former director of charter development at Basis Ed, the charter school, and the incumbent, Diane Douglas, who was elected to this post in 2014 and is running for re-election before that, a board member at Peoria Unified. The format, very simple. Everything is about a minute long, including the opening statements, the closing statements, and then a question that each candidate will have a chance to address. There'll be some free form, hopefully some exchanges that we'll try to keep contained and polite, not talk over each other too much. And there are some questions that we got from our Facebook community out there, and we'll include those as well. We'll start with the opening statements, a minute each, and through a random number generator drawing, Frank Riggs goes first.
Thank you, Richard. Good evening again. Good evening to our audience on Facebook, and thank you to the AZ Central for sponsoring the debate. I am Frank Riggs. I have spent my entire adult life serving country, community, and my fellow citizens. I'm an Army veteran, former police officer and deputy sheriff, as you mentioned, former 3-term United States congressman, and I have been an education leader, a leader in education who gets real results for the last 30 years at the local, state, and federal level as an elected school board member and school board president, as founding president of Arizona Connections Academy, an accredited online K-12 charter school, and as chairman of the House of Representatives Education Subcommittee. I am passionate about every Arizona student getting a good education that prepares them for college, career, and citizenship. And I look forward to our discussion tonight and the specific ideas I have for reforming and improving Arizona education.
Thank you. Right on time. Bob Branch.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bob Branch. Let me ask you a simple question. If you needed surgery, would you call a politician? Of course not. It doesn't make any sense. Just like it doesn't make any sense to keep electing politicians to run our state's education system. I feel that it's time that we break this cycle. I think it's time that we elect an educator, not a legislator. I'm a veteran, I'm a businessman, I'm a proven leader. In education, I'm the most accomplished candidate to run for this position in generations. Dean of Education, Dean of Technology. I'm the educator of educators. I've educated many of our superintendents, principals, and thousands of teachers. I say it's time that we elect the educator of educators to run our state's education system. I'm Dr. Bob Branch, and I look forward to earning your vote tonight.
Tracy Livingston.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm the only candidate that is a Republican, non-union K-12 teacher. I have served Arizona students for the last 16 years at almost every grade. But I'm more than a teacher. I'm also a fiscal conservative that has a plan to fight for the taxpayer. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and most recently, a grandmother. And we've always believed in school choice. While I worked in the public system, my son went to private schools. It was our choice. It was the best fit for him. I believe the parents have the right to choose what's best for their individual child and their individual education needs. A vote for Livingston is a vote for someone who will fight for all of our kids, no matter the zip code. And I thank you very much for this debate this evening.
I think we can all agree to wish you congratulations on becoming your grandmother.
Thank you.
Next, minute-long opening statement, Jonathan Gilbert.
Good evening. I'm Jonathan Gilbert, for Republican candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. I'm proud to be a born and raised Arizonan. I grew up in our public schools in Northwest Phoenix. I worked my way from there to Stanford University. I got my undergrad there and my master's in engineering. And I moved back to Arizona specifically to get involved in helping our schools. I joined Basis Charter Schools and managed the opening of 15 of their campuses that today serve more than 10,000 students in some of the top-ranked schools in the country, totaling over $250 million of projects. And I want to take what I've learned to the state level to make sure every kid in Arizona has access to a truly excellent education. We need new, stronger leadership for Arizona's education system, and not just new leadership, but a new kind of leadership. Someone focused on solutions, solving problems, facing our challenges head on, and getting results for our kids. So thank you, and again, I'm Jonathan Gelbart for Superintendent.
Thank you. Everyone's staying on time. We'll see if the incumbent can make it a clean sweep. Diane Douglas, you're a minute.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you to the Republic for having us here this evening. I'm Diane Douglas, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as Arizona's superintendent because nothing is more important than educating our children. And it's not about merely making them worker bees or college applicants. It's about making them successful citizens of our state and of our nation. I've been involved in Arizona's education landscape for over 25 years. We moved here from New Jersey to raise and educate our daughter, to get a great education for her. When I ran for this office, I ran to repeal and replace Common Core. I've done that. We're working on new history and science standards to make sure our kids get the education they need. And I beg to disagree. The #1 function of the Arizona Department of Ed is getting $10 billion to our schools and our districts. And I have the financial background to get that done. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll go to questions. Each candidate will get a minute to respond. Again, we like the minute. And hopefully there'll be a little time if there's some back and forth that we wish to go in. First question, we'll start again with Frank Riggs. All of you may have heard of a movement called Red for Ed. It made quite a spectacle and was able to argue, well, I mean, it argued that schools weren't adequately funded, and those feelings and the walk-ins coalesced into a protest movement that shut down Arizona schools statewide, pretty much statewide, in April. Question for Frank Riggs and the rest of you. What message did you take from the Red for Ed movement?
Well, I certainly understand the frustration that drove the Red for Ed movement. Education funding and therefore teacher compensation has been largely stagnant in our state for a decade, since the Great Recession. And in many instances, many districts, teachers have had to pay more, they've had to contribute more for their benefits. But I part company with the leadership of Red for Ed. These are highly partisan political operatives with a very clear political agenda. Here's what I want to do to address the concerns behind Red for Ed. I want to index per pupil funding to student enrollment growth and inflation. And in order to recruit and retain the very best teachers for Arizona students, I think we need to benchmark their compensation, that is to say their pay and benefits, against neighboring states in the Southwest region. So again, I understand the frustration, but I don't agree with the leadership of the Red for Ed movement.
Mr. Branch.
Thank you very much. I teach teachers at the doctorate level over at Grand Canyon. In fact, I teach at the #1, #2 Christian universities in the world, Liberty University and Grand Canyon. Many of my students are K-12 teachers, 12 to 14 years in classroom. And with those students, I know that many of them were significantly underpaid, and I understand that. However, the movement itself, Red for Ed, I was not for. When we all debated at LD 20, the current superintendent was not there, but everybody else said that they were Red for Ed. I said that I was not, and the reason why is because I believe that our teachers should have gotten raises. Many of them should have. However, the movement itself was not organic. We've seen it start over in West Virginia and move across, and to me, political ideology in schools like that have no purpose. Thank you.
Well, as a classroom teacher, I understand their frustration. After 16 years and a master's degree, I make $44,000 a year. For me, it's never been a complaint, but it's a reality. Funds obviously have depleted, also services and morale on the campus. This did not begin overnight. This began years ago. How do we address this? I like the other candidates here, parted ways. I understood their frustration, but parted ways as soon as they went on strike. You don't strike on kids. You just don't. That's not anyone's mission. And to be quite frank, most teachers didn't want to do it, but their schools were closed. My plan is to get more money into the classroom. But first we have to understand where the monies are. We need to audit our districts. We need to make a transparent, open checkbook on our ADE and our districts. And also we need to reform Prop 301 and move forward with more dollars into the classroom.
Thank you. Same question. What message did you take from Red for Ed to Mr. Gelbart?
So Red for Ed didn't come out of nowhere. Our teachers have really been toiling under low pay and poor working conditions for a long time, and that's where this came from. And I think what came out of it, the 20 by 2020 plan, I think was a great thing for our schools. We've had teachers all around Arizona already get wage increases from that plan. However, I did not support the walkout. Once Governor Ducey announced his 20 by 2020 plan, I think they should have called off the walkout. And I put out a statement on the first day of the walkout saying I thought it was a bad idea. I thought it could damage public support for future funding increases for education, which I do think are needed. And so that's what I take out of it. In West Virginia, remember, teachers there only got a 5% raise. So a 20% raise, including 10% that's already happened for our Arizona teachers, is a big deal.
Excellent. And Diane Douglas, I know you were asked to speak about this a lot, but in
Yes,
a minute, what was your take on the Red for Ed movement?
And I was out a week before the strike, imploring our teachers not to walk out. And despite rumors, I never threatened them, but I did feel it was my duty to apprise them of the potential consequence. I'm the only one that's been out for 3.5 years, thanks to my listening tours, advocating on behalf of our teachers, because that's the #1 message I heard from citizens as I traveled the state to bring them all to the table, was we want our teachers paid better. Unfortunately, in Arizona, we've had many promises. We had the lottery, we had Indian gaming, we had Prop 301 that all promised to go to our teachers, and yet none of them are an independent resource for K-12. So what we need to look at, in my opinion, is a revenue stream. But the message I took away from Red for Ed, unfortunately, in many ways, is a sad one, that now our parents are concerned about their children's classrooms and their teachers this year. We need to restore that trust.
Well, I guess kind of following up, there was a Facebook comment from Kyle Kennedy on Facebook who asked about if people supported any kind of tax increase to help, as he said, to properly fund public schools. You're calling for a revenue increase of some sort. I'll throw it open if anyone else wishes to jump into.
Well, Mrs. Douglas, you know, this is on the record. Mrs. Douglas has long proposed a 66% permanent $400 million a year increase in sales taxes, and at prior debates and forums, Mrs. Douglas then takes the opposite position, kind of debating herself, saying that she acknowledges that sales taxes are inherently regressive and disproportionately impact fixed and low-income individuals. More importantly, we are too dependent on the sales tax in Arizona. It accounts for more than 50% of all state government revenue.
Is there a type of tax you would support?
Yes, you know, and this, interestingly enough, in my interaction with the editorial board, somehow this got lost, but it's actually in my candidate questionnaire in the voter guide. I have been calling for a moratorium on corporate income tax cuts. I've been very explicit about that. And by the way, I'm the only person up here who's been a CEO in the private sector and can walk that talk. But the fact of the matter is, I'll finish. The fact of the matter is that our state economy has fully recovered from the Great Recession. Our national economy has. We've cut federal corporate tax rates by 40%. And frankly, it's time for the business community, and particularly our large corporations and major employers in the state, to step up and invest more in K-12 education, because they have a vital interest in an educated...
So you're talking about closing some corporate loopholes?
Yes.
Mr. Branch.
Well, first of all, what Mr. Riggs said about is being the only one up here as a CEO is just not true. I've been a CEO of 2 different companies in my lifetime. Actually, I had a database development firm right before 9/11.
Right.
So,
Mr. Kennedy talked about...
But what I want to... Yes, and I want to make this really clear. 2 points, though. First of all, Ms. Livingston said that like the other candidates, I separated from Red for Ed. Well, I was never with Red for Ed. So, but another point that I would like to make, though, as far as tax increases, I stand with President Trump to dismantle the United States Department of Education. If we dismantle the United States Department of Education and we keep our money here, eliminate the bloated bureaucracy, the reality is we'll have more than enough money to fund our education system. So no, I don't support tax increases.
That's 2 ideas. Your idea, our reader would wish to know if you would raise taxes to support education.
You're asking me?
Oh,
Gilbert, go
Ms.
ahead.
Livingston.
Well, I guess we're going out of order. So,
All right.
I just want to comment that Mr. Riggs said he supports a corporate tax cut moratorium, but that won't raise any revenue. Just stopping more cuts won't raise any new revenue. So we need to look at potential new revenue sources. The Supreme Court has opened the door for gaming revenue, sports betting, and if the governor and the legislature decide to bring that to Arizona, then I would push to make sure that those tax revenues go toward education.
Gaming revenue, and I guess let's just clarify, you're talking about, and it's Ms. Livingston's turn next, so I just want to make sure, you're talking about halting new loopholes or going back and looking at
I'm talking about a moratorium on the phased corporate tax. And of course,
on new ones.
I mean,
Okay, so I guess,
and of course that would generate more revenue.
Right, going
That's just a
forward, there might
misunderstanding
be
on his
more
part.
money coming in. Your thoughts on revenue?
Sure. Here's the thing. Right now, we have about $6 billion from land trusts. We have Prop 301 monies, which I do believe need reform because there's what we call in teaching buckets, and the buckets don't always get to the teachers. We also have 53% of our funding that goes into education. We're all sitting here not knowing where it goes. Let's first audit, let's first make it transparent, and then let's go to the next step. The House and the legislature right now are working on reform for Prop 301. Whether that's removing the buckets or taking the next step, I don't know what it is, but they're opening dialogue, looking at the consistent funding stream that started long ago for education and maximizing it and make it 2018. And that's what I'd like to work with the House and legislature on.
And would you like to expand on your thoughts? You brought up revenue.
Well, and that's an issue. Prop 301 is one I have been talking about for well over a year. And yes, Mr. Riggs is correct. I'm not a fan of sales tax, but that is the readily available vehicle we had at that time to talk about. I was talking about a 0.4 cent increase, which would have generated a lot of money. We thankfully do have Prop 301 renewed, which would have been a horrible fiscal cliff for our districts and our school board members to have to deal with. So we have that piece. But what we really need to look at in Arizona is something new, not the same old ways. And one idea I've heard bantered about, which I think deserves discussion, is an excise tax, that instead of taxing our own citizens endlessly, we start bringing revenue into this state.
Interesting.
May I
Thank
add
you,
one-
Kyle Kennedy,
may I add one
for
quick
that
thing?
question. Very quick.
Very, very quick. Money doesn't create better education. Reform with dollars creates better education. So we do need to, whatever the system is that goes forward, let's make sure that we're having reform in our
And
educational
that brings
processes
us to our
too.
next one, because you'll still have a chance to talk about money
Okay.
here.
But you supported
Kyle,
a tax increase on energy.
we'll get to looking at it
absolutely.
now.
Down in Chandler, you did.
No, I didn't.
Voters, and the first question goes to you. This question starts with you.
Thank you.
Voters are going to possibly face a ballot measure known as Invest in Education, sort of an outgrowth of the Red for Ed movement. Red for Ed is now supporting this, that raises income taxes on the state's wealthiest residents. Assuming it makes the ballot, Mr. Branch, do you support it? And if not, what would you suggest as an alternative? I know you've touched on it, but do you
Yes.
support the Invest in Ed?
I do
initiative?
not. I do not. Actually, I spoke to several groups of Red for Ed about this. First of all, we have 1, 2, 3 that is still being litigated. So we don't know exactly what we need. I don't support new taxes at all, as you just heard all 4 of them said that they do. To me, again, you have to look at what we actually want to do in education. We have a bloated bureaucracy. If we send 80 cents up and we get $1 back, we still have to spend 47% of that in administrative costs just to grant right to get the money back. We'd be better off just keeping our money. We'd get rid of the federal mandates that are keeping our teachers from teaching. So no, I do not support Invest for Ed or any other new tax increases. That just doesn't make any sense to me in my conservative nature.
Ms. Livingston.
No, not Invest in Ed, and here's one huge reason why. The taxation would hurt the people moving into Arizona to open up business. If we don't continue to have the business revenue stream, we're going to be back to where we were pre-Governor Ducey days. We've been digging ourselves out of a hole. We're finally at a plateau, and we want to continue moving forward. This would hurt our economy. It also, again, is not a well-written policy. We don't really know where that $700 million is exactly going. Is it exactly in the classroom? Is it exactly for teachers? Is it for new programs? So that makes me a little leery. And finally, again, if we're just putting dollars without asking for educational reform, where do we go? That's not good policy.
Mr. Gelbart, red for
Right.
red. I'm sorry, Invest in Ed.
Right. I do not support the Invest in Ed income tax hike. I think it's a bad move. I think, you know, the claims that it will bring in the amount of dollars that it will, the almost $700 million, I think that's not necessarily going to be the case. Folks with wealth are able to shift their assets to other states and get out of that, and that'll leave our small businesses holding the bag, and I think it could potentially harm our Arizona economy. I think it's a bad idea. Also, the idea that we're going to support education as long as those other people, those rich people over there, are the ones who pay for it, is just bad public policy and a bad precedent.
And Ms. Douglas, Invest in Ed.
Yeah, no, I do not support Invest in Ed. What that will do is hurt our job creators, and that can jeopardize the 2020 plan that the governor put on the table to get our teachers the raises that they deserve. You know, Mr. Riggs actually talked about a plan initially that he felt that our small businesses who pay less than $50 should be taxed to support our education system. But we can't just look at one group of people, and it can't be our small businesses who are our job creators. To Dr. Branch's point about the federal government, what he needs to understand is the way the system's currently created, if we don't take our federal funds, that means our most vulnerable children are going to be hurt because the federal government will send our money to other states.
Thank you. For those of you scoring at home, that's 4 out of the 5 candidates so far have not supported Invest in Ed. We'll see if it's a clean sweep.
It is.
All right.
It is. And by the way, that's a complete misrepresentation by Mrs. Douglas, but I'm not surprised because she's gone all over the state saying she got rid of Common Core, and all independent objective observers who've looked at the current standards compared to the Common Core say they're virtually the same. And we have a Common Core line state standardized
But the
test.
question is Invest in Ed.
But Invest in Ed, I believe I'm probably the only candidate that submitted a ballot argument against Invest in Ed. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the reason I did is I feel so strongly that it would be counterproductive. It's a tax on entrepreneurial risk-taking and job creation. It's a tax on capital formation and investment. It would ultimately lead, as some of my opponents have pointed out, to a loss of businesses and jobs, and I think, in the long run, a decline in state government revenue, not an increase. And furthermore, there's no accountability provision in Invest in Ed. There's no stipulation that we try to get more dollars into the classroom, and the promoters of Invest in Ed all have one thing in common. They all oppose parental school choice.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Livingston with the next question, because voters will face another question in November, this one for sure, a referendum on whether the state should expand the Empowerment Scholarship account program to all public school students, all Arizonans. What is your opinion on how voters should handle that proposition?
Conundrum. Let me explain. I am school choice 100%, always have been, kind of lived it, with our own choice for our own son. If it passes, then a cap of 30,000 students can be served. If it doesn't pass, then it most likely will go back to the legislature for some sort of rewriting, whether it's next year or in the coming years. As I've always said, I'm in support of it. I will vote yes.
Mr. Gilbert, your thoughts on this referendum voters will face?
So the Empowerment Scholarship Account program is a really interesting one because it's often referred to as vouchers in shorthand, but it's really more than vouchers. It's a complete funding source for parents to customize their kids' education. They can use part of the funds for curriculum, part of them for online classes, part of them for extracurriculars if they're academic, or even tutors if their kid has a disability. So there's a lot of flexibility and potential in the program, and that's why I support it. The Prop 305 has that 30,000 student enrollment cap in it. That's less than 3% of all students in Arizona. So this is not a threat to our public schools. This is a limited scope pilot program that we should give a shot. And if there's any chance it'll get us closer to the goal of getting every child an excellent education, we should vote yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Thank you. I take a little bit different view consistently than everybody up here because I'm in a very different position from anyone up here. I'm the head, so I take a nuanced view, if you will. I am the head of the agency that has the fiscal responsibility for that program. And it's a program that many in Arizona love and many in Arizona hate. But I don't take a stance on the program because my duty is to oversee the program. So I have to ensure that we are a great fiscal agent for the taxpayer, the public funds that go into that program. And so I want all Arizonans to be certain that there will always be fair accountability on my behalf for that program, regardless of how they feel about the program.
But do you have an opinion on the proposition?
I will not take a stance on the proposition because it impacts the program. I stand ready, willing, and able to implement whatever the will of the voters is.
Mr. Riggs, how would you advise voters handle this referendum?
You know, I'm really torn on this. I believe that parents have a fundamental right to choose and direct their child's education, and the flip side of that coin, a responsibility as well. And I've been a strong supporter of parental school choice, going back to introducing the first such empowerment scholarship accounts bill on the floor of the House of Representatives. But the question really is, will the ESE program be capped at 30,000 additional scholarships? That's the question before the voters. And my advice behind the scenes to the governor, now Congresswoman Lesko, then State Senator Lesko, who reached out to me, was to make sure that any expansion was mean tested to give low-income families parity, if you will, priority and parity. Why do I say that? Because low-income families, it's well documented, are less mobile. They have less ability to take advantage of school choice. So if right now, if we're saying that ESAs are going to be permanently capped at a 30,000 expansion, I say send it back to the legislature and let's means test it.
A no. Mr. Branch, how would you tell the voters to vote
Thank
on
you.
this one?
You know, everybody, my name's Dr. Bob Branch, and you know, first of all, our current superintendent said that she's been the most consistent on this. I beg to differ. I actually have. I want to address something on this issue. I called it a Band-Aid before, and some people wrote me on Facebook and that, well, what do you mean a Band-Aid? Well, we have over 1 million students. Over 77% of our schools are Title I funded schools. Our schools are broken. 30,000, and this is all it's capped at, is a Band-Aid. It's not a fix. And to me, it really doesn't go far enough. To me, why cap it at 30,000? I believe in parental choice. I believe that a student, if I had a student in a failed school, I believe that I should be able to take that student out of that school. However, I also believe that as superintendent of public instruction, my job is to fix all of those schools, and that will be my job. Thank you.
How would you vote?
Well, on this right now, I'd vote yes.
Okay. Yeah, it will be a fascinating issue as this goes forward. Next question.
Well, can we just open
Sure,
it up for
yes.
a second? So I just want to comment on the fact that Superintendent Douglas has kind of doubled down on her position that she also talked about in our last debate, where she's refusing to take a position on this, which is really an abdication of the bully pulpit, which is one of the most important roles of the state superintendent of public instruction. And I think it's very important for the superintendent to be a voice and be a leader on these types of issues. And this is not the only example.
Would you like to expand on the reasons behind your no comment?
Once again, it's not a no comment. I have a very different responsibility from my 4 opponents up here. I am fiscally responsible for a program that allocates public money. And it is quite frankly, many people on both sides of the aisle on this one, and whichever side of the aisle they are on, they must be assured that the Department of Education will always be fair in
See,
their
that's
oversight.
I don't see the conflict there.
Let me ask it this way. Do you think if you expressed an opinion on this program, it would taint voters' opinion of how you are running the program?
They could.
Okay.
I believe
do
that. They
opponents
can
disagree?
disagree
To
all
me,
they
Mr.
want,
Branch?
but
This all goes to the fact that, you know, at our leadership, there hasn't been the leadership. Nobody has been stepping forward. For instance, Red for Ed, nobody stepped forward. Nobody stepped forward when Governor Ducey put together his panel of experts in this office. Now to turn around on an important issue like this and say, whatever happens, happens, I'll make it happen, I'll do it, to me is as Mr. Gilbert said, a complete avocation
Well,
of
let's
that
say if the voters
pulpit.
philosophically
But the
passed
voters
a program you
elected her in,
philosophically
and she has
opposed
the,
to.
she has the responsibility of letting them know.
Pardon me.
Yes, sir.
If the voters passed a program that you philosophically opposed, and you expressed an opinion in opposition, do you think the voters would still be able to trust you to enact that?
Well, sure,
program?
because it's part of the job. They would have. I would have to do what the voters said to do.
Other opinions, Mr.
Yes.
Rhodes?
I believe perhaps Tracy has, but otherwise, and certainly Diane, but I've taken an oath of office. I was elected to high
I do every
office.
2
and
years.
The oath it's hard when you're being constantly interrupted.
Well, he didn't lie about you. He said he takes an oath of office. He said the others also do take an oath of office. If we didn't know you did,
Tracy.
that's not...
Just Tracy.
Right, but
No,
that's
no,
not
okay,
necessarily-
I'll-
I didn't know you
It's
took an oath of
okay.
office.
Richard, I'll just
I'm the
I'll just
Commissioner of
retract
Park
it.
and
You take an oath of
I'll
office.
retract it and just talk about my own experience. I have taken an oath of office. 3 times I was sworn into the United States Congress. And when I did that, I swore that I would support and defend the Constitution of the United States and fully and faithfully execute the laws of the United States. There's no conflict between advocating a particular position and also carrying out your sworn responsibilities to fully and faithfully implement and manage policy and the law.
Understood. And Ms. Livingston, do you have a thought on this?
Just very quick, yes, and it saddens me to have to say this. Superintendent Douglas hasn't led in the House or the Senate, the governor's office, quite frankly, or even ABOR for ASU, U of A, NAU. She hasn't been there. What this seems to me, and I say this with great respect, Superintendent Douglas, but a campaign ploy. We have to answer, you are running for office, just answer the question. It's okay.
And I think, I mean,
I
you've
have
discussed
answered
it.
the
Yes, and
question
you've discussed the
several
reason
times
why.
over, and
Okay.
I've explained the reason
I see
why.
if voters get
If
it.
it's not
move on.
acceptable to my opponents, that's their problem.
And one way to look at it is,
Okay.
Mr. Branch, you are providing a director's commentary to the debate. This is good.
Well,
The next question goes to
It's not the
Mr.
first time, Richard.
The next question goes to Mr. Gilbert.
I am a
By luck of
leader.
the
I
draw,
apologize.
because this actually should have been tailor-made for you.
All right.
Is there sufficient oversight? I mean, Craig Harris, whose desk is right over there.
Yeah.
Craig Harris has done a lot of reporting about charter schools
Mm-hmm.
and people making some pretty good profits on running them. Do you believe there's sufficient oversight on public charter schools? And if not, how should it be improved?
I think there's definitely room for improvement there. There is, I think it is important for people to know that in the last legislative session, the legislature did pass a bill that provides, that delegates more responsibility to the Arizona State Board for Charter Schools to take action against charter schools that are failing to meet the financial framework. And that is an important oversight tool that was not there before that has now already been implemented. So I think that's a good thing people need to know about. There are other issues that we've seen in charter schools with self-dealing, nepotism, conflicts of interest, and I think especially on the real estate side, where you have owners of charter schools that are participating in the ownership of the land or the buildings that their own schools operate, I think that does need to be looked at more carefully.
Ms. Douglas, your thoughts on how the state oversees its charter schools?
And I can speak from experience on this because I've served on the State Board for Charter Schools for the last 3.5 years since taking office. Absolutely, it's an area that needs more oversight because, once again, we are talking about taxpayer money. As Mr. Gelbart already said, yes, the legislature for the first time has given that board a new tool. They could not close a school for financial reasons in the past. There was actually a policy that's been recommended and many charters bring forward to amend their policy, which says they can't buy from a fellow board member unless the board votes and says they can. I consistently voted against that policy because it's not in the best interest. And they've since removed those votes from the board agenda. So maybe that's something others don't want to hear. But yes, when it comes to taxpayer money, we always have to be very diligent.
Mr. Riggs, your thoughts on charter
Well,
school
I'm
oversight?
the author of the Federal Charter School Expansion Act of 1998 that created a competitive grants program at the state and local level to help charter schools with their startup and expansion costs, including the very schools that Jonathan worked for right out of college. fact of the matter is charter schools are supposed to be nimble and innovative. They're supposed to be the R&D arm of K-12 public education and develop best practices that can be shared with all K-12 schools. And I think Craig did a huge public service in his article pointing out the need for the charter school movement, the charter school sector, to police its own. Because the bad actors, and there's only a few, because most charter schools are doing excellent work and are serving 188,000 of our K-12 students, but a few bad actors give the entire movement a black eye. So what have I proposed? Exactly what I said in my questionnaire and in the Ed Board interview. Every charter school should have a majority of independent directors on their governing board who have formal training in charter school governance and their legal and fiduciary responsibilities, including their duty to very carefully examine any related party transactions.
This is a plug for the voter's guide, which you can find on the AZ Central website for these and all the other candidates. Mr. Branch, your thoughts on the charter school oversight that the state's doing?
You know, what comes to mind, and with Mr. Gelbart, what he had said, you know, Ray Kroc thought he was in the hamburger business until somebody said, no, you're in the real estate business. And that seems to be more and more what the charter schools are in, the real estate business, and that's how a lot of the money is being made. To me, oversight has to be enhanced. Regarding the oath of office, I do want to make clear that I'm elected PC, so every 2 years I take an oath of office, and I'm also your Commissioner of Park and Recreations for Maricopa County. I'm in my 4th term. Each term starts off with an oath of office. So I'd just like to make that clear.
Excellent. We'll attend your next ceremony.
It just happened. I just started my 4th term a couple months ago.
Miss Livingston.
You missed it.
We'll look for the invitation.
Miss
Of course,
Livingston,
when I'm
you're-
sworn in as superintendent, I'll invite you.
Absolutely, we'll all watch. Miss Livingston.
Since 2008, our district costs have risen. Our classroom, the dollars going to the classroom have shrunk. We not only need more oversight in our charter schools, we need more oversight in our regular public schools. Public charter, public schools, they both take public money. Since the new bill has been adopted for the charter board, as superintendent, we would be overseeing the new transparency that we would want to see in the in the financial documents. But again, it goes back to an audit, financial transparency, and making sure the monies are absolutely going to our students first and our districts and administrators second.
Excellent. This next question will start with you, Ms. Douglas. And it was a Facebook question from Leslie Dow, who asked, and used your name in her question.
Oh.
She had a comment and then a question. So I'll read the comment first. This year, Diane Douglas, that is you, tried to remove certain proven concepts in science, according to Leslie Dow, such as evolution, from the curriculum. Removing accepted facts puts kids at a competitive disadvantage. The question, do you support the teaching of what she calls accepted science, including evolution, and the science behind our changing climate, so our kids and state can compete in tech and science careers? That's a question from Leslie Dow on Facebook. Ms. Douglas, your thoughts?
Well, I can answer that very succinctly, quite frankly. There are actually, if people took the time to read the draft standards in science, there are actually more standards related to evolution in the proposed drafts than there are in the standards that may potentially be replaced if the State Board of Ed chooses to go that direction. So my goal with the upgrade that we will do, or the revision that we will do on standards, is to make our children critical thinkers. Whatever the issue is in science, quite frankly, whatever the issue is in any area, our children should be brought information. They should be brought all sides of an argument. They should be taught how to weigh the validity of different sides of an argument and be able to use scientific information. As a matter of fact, under some of the new standards, they actually want to remove the scientific method, and that's appalling to me.
Mr. Gilbert, your thoughts on science standards in our schools?
Yeah, so we were asked this question for the first time back last November of, do you support intelligent design being taught alongside evolution in science class? And I was the only one at that time to say that I absolutely do not support that, that science class should be only for science. And my competitors here on the stage have I believe, except for Dr. Branch, have all backtracked at least.
Thank you very much. I don't have to comment then.
At least in whole, in part, or in whole. And I think I just want to be crystal clear to the voters that I have stood my ground on that. That is a really important issue for me, and I think it's very important we keep science only in the science classroom.
Thank you. Ms. Livingston.
Well, sitting on the governing board for Maricopa Community College, what I did is I went to Maricopa Community College science teachers. I went to high school science teachers. They're not a huge fan of the proposed standards. Why? It doesn't relate to what the child needs in community college or university. So no, I do not support the current standards. And also, there's another step backwards. I'm the only one that's taught in a K-12 classroom. You really can't bring up creationism. It's just a no-no. We don't even really talk about it, quite frankly. And the question in Tempe caught me by surprise, that in all my years, in every grade level, when I had to teach science, it is literally something principals, your team says, remember, just kind of skate through that and go right on to evolution. So no, I don't support anything that would make our parents, our teachers, administrators, or our colleges concerned or not ready for science education.
Thank you. Mr. Branch.
Yet in Tempe, you said that you did support it. I went back and even looked at it, and it was amazing. Then you said even in the classrooms, behind doors, you were doing it.
No, sir.
So, and that's in a tape.
But
too.
your thoughts?
But my thoughts are, I teach at the #1, #2 Christian universities in the world. I believe in intelligent design. I don't believe that it's mutually exclusive from evolution. I believe that there is a science behind intelligent design, so where Mr. Gilbert said science should be left to science, I believe in the science of intelligent design.
Okay.
May I?
Yes.
Okay.
Before Mr. Riggs, we'll just
Sure.
give you a 10-second rebuttal.
In Tempe, what I really did mean about this, and maybe it didn't come out correctly, and I apologize, we're in a lot of these different things. Look, school doesn't allow even Merry Christmas anymore. I wish we could say something, there is creationism, there are these things. We can't say it. There's one thing to want it, there's another thing to actually do it.
Did you say it behind closed doors, I guess
No.
is what he was asking.
No.
Okay.
But you
Mr.
said
Riggs.
you want
That's
to be
what
able
you
to
said.
say it.
Exactly.
Wait,
Exactly.
no,
Yes, you
excuse
did
me.
it in
The
a forum.
Yeah.
I wish we could be that open.
Well,
Is
you
fair.
said we close our doors and
That's
teach
exactly
whatever
what
we want to
it's
teach.
exactly what you said,
Yeah.
Tracy.
It's
I'm
all
sure-
on
I'm
tape.
sure-
It's all on
I'm sure
tape.
there'll be fact check.
Channel
and we'll go
12
through the social
Channel
media.
12 had
All
that
right,
in
But we'll get
in
Mr.
May.
Riggs answer the question before we open it up
let's
again.
fact check that. Look, while we're fact checking, by the way, let's ask Notre Dame University and Brigham Young University whether they're Christian universities and how they stack up. Anyway, like Tracy, I was completely caught off guard by that question at the Tempe Republican Women's Forum, and what I heard and mistook, and I'll take responsibility for that, is should creationism be taught alongside of intelligent design in our schools? And here's where I come down. There is no way that we can teach our founding fathers' beliefs in a creator who is the endower, the source of our unalienable human rights, without telling our students that they believe that profoundly and pledge their lives, their fortunes, and sacred honor in defense of that particular principle. So yes, I think with our older students in high school, secondary schools, I think they're perfectly capable of looking at the arguments on both sides of evolution, and certainly perfectly capable, should know what our founding fathers believed and put in our founding documents.
Well, I guess, Ms. Douglas, you're talking about creating critical thinkers. Is part of that creating critical thinkers giving them sort of a wide breadth of what is out there, including evolution all the way to intelligent design, including creationism, and letting them sort it out if they're old enough to handle it?
Personally, and I believe that's what we were asked in Tempe, what our personal beliefs were. And absolutely, yes, I do personally believe that. The courts have ruled very strongly, for whatever reason, perhaps judges rule that not only is creationism not allowed in our school, but intelligent design is not allowed in our schools. I vehemently disagree with that. I think we should be teaching. The tact we're taking in the current standards is that creation of the universe will be in world history, in our history standards, so that our students can learn the beliefs of all the different value systems. And one additional comment, if I may, Mrs. Livingston spoke to how the teachers hate these standards. Well, these teachers were created virtually, not exclusively, there were some minor edits done, but they were created by our teachers in Arizona. So I would like to think they probably do support them.
The creationary theory of standards. Mr. Gilbert, why do you think that why do you think that creationism and this mindset should not be subject of schools in a science class?
Because it's not science. I think if we want to expose kids and teach them about creationism and intelligent design from a historical perspective of cultures where this has been an important belief and its role in the history of the United States, I have no issue with that at all.
And who would decide what is science, what's history, what's out there? How do you decide what is
Well, it would end up
science?
going to the state board for a vote.
The standards. And you disagree with it not being science. You think that intelligent design, you mentioned
intelligent design is a science. Okay.
Federal courts have ruled it's a religious belief.
Well, that's federal courts. The Ninth Circuit Court too is the Ninth Circuit.
How do you think the scientific standard should be decided? Who decides what is science in a classroom setting?
Well, and here's the thing. When I watch, for instance, the debate with the Democrats, and we believe this too, that we should have inclusion, thoughts and ideas. We should have inclusion and diversity. However, as soon as I open my mouth and say, well, I believe in intelligent design, the first thing they say is, that's not science, that's against Constitution,
So how do we decide what is included?
Well,
right now, the courts unfortunately prevail in that decision.
There's courts, but do you have a different thought on?
You can absolutely, from the bully pulpit, advocate for intelligent design, or if you're evolution or whatever. But to me, intelligent design is a science.
And certainly scientists are pursuing a different thought process. There are many solid evolutionist scientists that now believe and espouse intelligent design.
We'll get to Ms. Livingston and Mr. Riggs if you have
No,
on this. You're good?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Riggs, anything left on this topic?
No, I'm good.
I love teaching government and civics. And I just want to point out, I always say the Declaration of Independence is the warranty and the Constitution is the owner's manual in our system of self-government through a representative democracy under a constitutional republic. But it all begins, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. We can't skip over that, or we do a huge disservice to our students.
And good, we're all standing for that recitation. Good.
Yes.
I'll get one policy wonk question, and then we'll get to the closing remarks, and we'll start with Mr. Riggs on this one. Are there too many school districts? Should the smaller ones be consolidated? This is for the education wonks out there.
Yeah. It may be in some communities that is a practical argument. The fact of the matter is we have roughly 230 some odd school districts, or what we call local education agencies in the state. 150 some odd of those are considered to be rural using the Census Bureau data. So in small rural communities, they have both an elementary or an elementary school district and a high school district. I think there could be consolidation. It's hard as a political matter to force consolidation, either through a vote at the state level or local level. So what we have to do is take the carrot approach. We have to incentivize consolidation by promising those consolidated districts that they can keep the cost savings that they achieve through consolidation and use them to further their mission and to serve their combined student enrollment.
District consolidation.
I appreciate that. I imagine, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I believe that we all get asked this question quite often. And under our state constitution, you have local control. That means you can open your school tomorrow, you can call it your school district tomorrow. You could be the superintendent, the principal, and you could be the history teacher as well, if that's what you'd like to be. And there are, in this state, we have over 66 schools with one school systems with one school. Mm-hmm. And that's because they're rural schools. And again, the principal is the superintendent is this. And I think that's a beautiful part of our Constitution. There are some school districts, like Tucson Unified School District, that needs completely dismantled and maybe brought into maybe 8 or 9 of them. But the reality is, we can consolidate, and here's how we consolidate. I support and advocate that we have a central purchasing to allow schools then to use resources, then they can consolidate instead of worrying about their own resources.
Thank you. Ms. Livingston, district consolidation.
We do have too many districts, but here's the reality. One district has to vote yes at their school board, the other has to vote yes, then the community, then the other community. There can't be any bonds or overrides in the mix. Sure, we can incentivize. We can see which districts naturally want to come together. There are some that are talking about it now, out at least in the west side. Will that happen in the next couple years? Who knows, but they're starting the conversation because they want to save money. I also agree that perhaps that we look at first centralizing some services and allowing pretty much the organic coming together of school districts as need be. Our rural districts, they want to stay rural and by themselves because that best fits their needs. And ones like Tucson and the other behemoth ones might not fit their needs down the road and may want to break up.
Excellent. Mr. Gilbert.
Yeah, we do get this question a lot. And so really it comes down to local control. We have local control in Arizona. I believe in local control. When these types of issues have come up for a vote of the people in the past, almost all of them get voted down. And until that starts to change, I don't think this is going to change. I wrote a detailed blog post about this about a week ago that anyone's free to look at. But what's surprising is actually there's not a lot of cost savings except in very, very small districts. So if you have districts that have 1,500 kids or fewer, then consolidating does end up saving money. But larger than that, the research says you don't end up saving money. So with that being said, there may be other reasons to push for consolidation. Getting every district to be a K-12 district, for example, rather than separate K-8 districts and high school districts, I think would probably be beneficial academically. But from a financial perspective, you might not see that much savings, and it still ends up being a local control decision.
Ms. Douglas, your thoughts on district consolidation?
Absolutely. The law currently allows for it if the people in those communities want it. And I agree, it is a local control issue. It is yet another form of parental choice or taxpayer choice if you want for them to make decisions. But one of the reasons I opposed forced consolidation is if we look around our nation, some of the absolute worst school districts we have are those that are county-wide or those that are city-wide in large cities. And that's because it's taking choices away and it's taking the freedom away from locally elected governing boards to make the best decisions for their communities.
Excellent. I think we're on to closing statements. We're going to go in reverse order of how we started, which means you're on again. I don't know if you need, I'll keep talking until you get ready for your first minute because you're on again.
I didn't bring the water up
all
with
right,
me,
go.
so that's all right. I
can
can't
commentate if you'd like.
Well, 1 minute
water
closing
anyway.
statement for Diane Douglas.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to serve the people of Arizona. As I said earlier, educating our children is the most important thing we do. We've increased the rigor of our academic standards. We'll bring new history and science to the case. Absolutely, we must support parental choice, and I've been a big advocate for that. But again, the main role of the Department of Education is to oversee $10 billion in that neighborhood. And we've been implementing new procedures, getting our money to our districts earlier than ever before, making sure that we have better accountability. My opponents, all due respect, don't even understand when Mrs. Livingston talks about audits. She doesn't even realize we do those already. So I ask for the vote. I'm Diane Douglas, and I ask for the vote, your vote, everyone out there, so that we can continue the work we do on behalf of your children and your very precious grandchildren. Thank you, and God bless.
Mr. Gilbert, your closing statement.
Right. For the voters out there, if your #1 issue in this race is making sure a Republican wins in November, I'm your candidate. I've been the top fundraiser in this race for the entire campaign. That makes me the only candidate with a proven ability to compete with the Democrats in fundraising. I've also been endorsed by the Arizona Republic. If your #1 issue in this race is evolution, I'm your candidate. I'm the only one who has stood firm in saying that only science should be in the science classroom. If your #1 issue is getting better results for our kids, I'm your candidate. I'm the only one who's worked for some of the top-ranked schools in the country on this stage. And if your #1 issue is getting a superintendent who will bring a new perspective, fresh ideas, and a vision for what's possible in Arizona education, making us a national leader, then I'm your candidate. So for all those reasons and more, I hope I've earned your vote in this debate tonight for the Republican primary on August 28th, and you can learn more about me at Gelbart4az.com. Thank you very much.
We should note, just to avoid confusion, we're in the newsroom side, which the editorial board meets literally as far away from where we are standing as possible in the newsroom. We operate independently of them, so the editorial board has endorsements, but it doesn't affect our coverage, believe it or not. Ms. Livingston.
Thank you very much for holding this debate. I'm an actual K-12 teacher that's taught every grade except 5th. If you want someone that actually understands what goes on in our day-to-day classrooms, what our teachers go through, what our kids go through, then I'm your gal. I'm also your gal if you support or believe in Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, Superintendent Lisa Graham-Keegan, Superintendent Jaime Molera, Senator Sylvia Allen, Representative Paul Boyer, and more. People are flocking to my vision because it's leading through reform of our education and implementation of all the federal and state policy. I will work with the House and Senate. I will work with our governor, and I do have a vision for what's better in Arizona. Thank you. Go to tracylivingston.vote, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
The .vote domain, I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it
.vote.
does.
You learn something new every day. Mr. Branch.
In 2016, an economist said that if you believe that our economy, that Donald Trump can get our economy to a 3% GDP, you believe in the tooth fairy. Well, last Friday, it hit 4.1. Donald Trump is delivering on his promise to make America great again. But in order to keep America great, we have to educate. That means that we have to fix Arizona's education system. I say that we follow President Trump's plan, get the best person in there you could possibly get to do the job. I am that person. I'm the educator of educators. I am the most accomplished candidate in this election in education for generations to run for this. I am asking you to put me into this office, and I'm asking you to let me do my job. And together, we will make education great again. I'm Dr. Bob Branch. I'm asking you for your vote. Please go to vote4branch.com. That's vote4branch.com. I look forward to your support. Early ballots just came out, and I look forward to your vote. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Branch. Mr. Riggs, you take us home.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. I'm glad you mentioned that caveat about the endorsement. Ironically, that's a head scratcher because the endorsed candidate is the least experienced and qualified candidate in the field. But be that as it may, I'll take the Mommy Lobby's endorsement any day of the week. I am Frank Riggs. I'm the only candidate up here who has a proven record of executive, educational, and legislative leadership. I believe that there's no greater purpose in life than serving others. And I think there's no greater purpose than helping every student, every child, realize their full potential. That's my motivation for running for superintendent of public instruction and bringing my 30 years plus of leadership experience to bear on reforming and improving Arizona K-12 education and fixing our schools. And I'll just close with this. There was a gentleman who commented in the Insider publication, the Yellow Sheet, if you have an established donor base, you probably aren't running for superintendent of public instruction.
You have 5 seconds.
Well, we'll see who ends up able to raise the most money. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not running for any other office. I'm running because I want this particular job. I'm Frank Riggs, candidate for superintendent of public instruction. I'd be honored to earn your trust, your support, and your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Thank you to our candidates. And also, I mean, this is a down ballot race in a primary. Traditionally doesn't get a lot of attention. Thank you for watching this and taking part in what is a great exercise in democracy and doing this. I mean, this
It's not the corporate commission.
and we are here. I mean, we're here in the newsroom, the Republic. Its mission is to provide great information to readers like you. So thank you for joining us. Have a good night.